Today we're here to educate community members and parents in regards to how tobacco is changing. We have Detective Aemus Balsis. He's going to be helping out with just different terms for vapes, how to identify a vape, understanding the structure of the vape, talk about legal age limits, and understanding the marketing and how youth are obtaining vapes. We also have Mindy Schwarz, district nurse for the Medford area public schools. She's going to be talking about data and statistics and the trends that we're seeing in our schools. And then we also have local provider here, Werner, physician assistant, working for Aspirus clinics here in Medford. He is going to be talking about the risks and harms of using vapes, the dangers of nicotine and marijuana, understanding how individuals become addicted to nicotine, symptoms that someone may be using, and then we're all going to discuss on tips of what parents can do to help with if you suspect your child is using nicotine.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to get into today is the different vape terms that are out there that manufacturers are using, kids are using, terms that you can search, online to learn more about this. But a lot of it comes into different styles of what the e-cigarettes are. It's an ever-changing thing, changing by the day, definitely by the year. The different styles are changing, the way they're advertising and trying to promote this idea onto kids. The different styles that they're using to develop e-cigarettes, from some of these standard ones, which were these, mid-sized, modified. This would be a modified vape. There was another one here. Mid-size, where it's pretty much just going to have a mouthpiece, a cartridge which would hold the oil or the vape solution, an atomizer, and then a battery pack. These come in different looks, where, say, this one here, very discreet, looks like you could put it in a purse and it would look just like a makeup device for a kid or for a female. You might look at this and skip right over it, not even realize it's in your kid's makeup pack or in her backpack or in her room. You may just overlook those issues. And then you have these disposable devices, which is really what is making the move these days. You just buy these. It's a one-fill cartridge, and then they are disposed of after they are used, and you just move on to another device. And then you have a lot of different coil packs where you can just fill them with different flavored juices, nicotine, or THC oils. A lot of kids, when they use these, they're going to refer to them as, just vape devices or dabbing. Dabbing is more of a term, a THC term, marijuana use term that you'll see kids use to ingest marijuana. It's not just with e-cigarettes. A lot of times with dabbing, it comes into different forms of THC. A lot of times it's waxes and oils, where you'll actually have a marijuana pipe, marijuana bong, and you're just going to heat up a metal component on that device and then have a dabbing or a pick type device, and you would take a small portion of that oil or wax and then expose it to that heated element, and you'd get you'd be smoking it very discreetly that way as well. A lot of these issues are odorless. You're not going to see them. It's just kind of a cloud of vape or a vape type mist that you will see.
So I get the question sometimes, if somebody were to vape THC and marijuana when smoked the traditional way, you have that strong odor. Do you have that strong odor with when somebody vapes THC?
No, you do not. No. That's what makes it very discreet, and you're actually unable to tell what the substance is in these devices. It could be just a flavored juice that is promoted to kids with different chemicals and compounds in it. It could be nicotine, or it could be THC. And a lot of these are coming in with different forms of marijuana, Delta-8 or other substances that are readily available to kids, online or in local vape shops. As I had said, vapes come in many different shapes and sizes. You have to know what you're looking for. But the most common part of them will be that there's going to be a mouthpiece, a battery, and an atomizer and a tank associated with them. Can kids use vapes under age 18? Well, it all depends. If it's nicotine products, THC products, absolutely not. But a lot of times with vaporizer devices, when it's just different flavored juices where there's no addictive compounds in it, such as nicotine, that is controlled by state law, federal law, then there's no regulation on that. But then oftentimes when they start using these flavored juices and different vapes, it just leads into them using nicotine products and THC products. Obviously in the state of Wisconsin, any THC related vape is illegal and is subject to criminal penalties here in the state.
And it's zero tolerance in the school district, right?
Absolute zero tolerance for vaping devices.
Of any kind.
Nicotine and THC in the school district.
And almost always, those juices contain nicotine. Like 99% of the time, there's nicotine found in them. Even if they say there's no nicotine, when we've researched that, it said they have found it.
There can be, but a lot of times for our enforcement, if we can't show that there's nicotine in it, then we don't take enforcement action on it. A lot of times there's school policy, school rules about what they can or can't have on school district property, but that's a lot of times dealt with within the school system itself, whereas law enforcement can take action on controlled substances, nicotine products, where citations can be issued to anybody under the age of 18 for possessing those items. And then obviously marijuana or THC, those substances are oftentimes referred to for criminal prosecution, but we oftentimes with individuals will just do juvenile referrals or issue citations for that simple possession as well. One big thing that manufacturers do to market these items to kids is they love to promote it that it is harmless. There is no danger to it. It's a safe alternative to smoking regular cigarettes. But there are so many different dangers associated with e-cigarettes, and we don't know what the long-term effects of that drug use is. Obviously, in the last 10 to 15 years is when vapes have really come onto the market, exploded in the last 5 years. So we don't know what those long-term effects are. With regular cigarettes, early 1900s, 1800s, a lot of times doctors would promote the use of cigarettes. It's good for you. You should smoke cigarettes. And it wasn't until the 1950s and 1960s that they started researching this and starting to realize that there were a lot of long-term effects and dangers and cancer-causing carcinogens in these in cigarettes and tobacco products, that they then regulated that. That still really hasn't happened. They haven't been able to promote that to kids to say that those dangers are there. And we haven't seen what those long-term effects are just because it's a relatively new product, and we haven't seen what the long-term effects are in 20, 30 years out. And what do manufacturers do to promote it to kids? I mean, you can just see on all of these models and all of these devices, they look harmless, they look fun, they look very discreet. They're going to promote it with candy flavors, sweet flavors, lemonade. Right, and bright colors. So anything that you see out here, especially like with dabbing, I mean, every container I've ever seen, these rubber containers where you'd store the oils, the waxes, they're always going to be in these super bright, vibrant colors, yellows, greens, reds, because that's what kids like. They like to see bright colors. They like to see sweet things. They like to see candy type products. And when they're promoted as that, they're not going to see it as a dangerous product. And they're more amped to use that product. And when they don't have people out there telling them, this is wrong, this is dangerous, these are the long-term effects, this is what you're getting exposed to, they're more prone to use, especially when they are being told that it's a safe replacement for the smoking of THC products or tobacco products. So where are kids obtaining these devices? I did briefly talk about that a little bit earlier, but that's primarily through friends. If you know, they got to be over 18 to purchase or obtain tobacco products or vapes. They'll oftentimes have friends, family members, parents buy for them, but you can readily buy these items online and have them shipped right to you as well, or have other people in other locations like tobacco or THC products in states that do legally sell those items. They might have people out in those areas that buy them and then ship those items to them through the mail. But the most common are friends and family and through our local vape shops here in town.
Aemus, if youth get vapes, like say their parent buys them or someone over the age of 18 buys it and gives it to them, is there any, like, do they get in trouble at all or any citation or anything in that part?
Yeah, with any product where you are buying or you are being solicited by anybody else, you know, and buy for them, you are subject to penalties for providing tobacco products to underage individuals, just as you would be for alcohol products. But oftentimes we don't know who those people are, or they just say, I got them from a friend and I'm not going to tell you who it is. You know, so, but most of the time you just know it is family or a friend that they're just going to be covering for.
It's absolutely crazy to me in the office when parents bring in their kids and they're like, yeah, he's just vaping. It's not a big deal, or it's healthy. And they'll get it for them because it's like, well, at least he's not drinking, or at least he's not smoking a cigarette. And I'm like, that's not good. And that's, well, it's illegal in a lot of cases because almost always contains nicotine. They're doing something that's not allowed at school daily. They're seeing it every day at school. It's definitely a gateway. It definitely pulls them into, they're doing something wrong and your parents are telling you it's not that bad and their friends are telling them it's right. It'd be like if you went to tell your kid you can't drink beer, or you can drink beer but not alcohol. They get there, what are the odds that they don't take a shot or something like that at a party? If they're going to start vaping, generally they're going to transition into either nicotine, THC, or modifying their vape to add something to it to make it cooler or different, or a different flavor, or to be the expert chemist in the middle school or high school. It's crazy that the parents are like, yeah, we do it for them, we get it for them, because they got to do something. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the message you're sending right now, is to bend the rules, to break the rules, to do this, because it might not be as bad. It's completely bad. And then I have to have a kind of a very frank conversation with a parent that's uncomfortable. But I can't, I don't know where the data is coming from that they're saying this isn't bad or this is totally okay. For certain, if it contains nicotine or THC or CBD derivative, which would be like the deltas, it is not good for you. It is cancer causing. It is bad. And we'll get to that when I talk too much. But yes, it's not good. And I can't believe that the parents are getting that message from somewhere. So I think it just needs to be, it needs to be publicized, a lot like nicotine was in the 90s on MTV, where it was like, here's your brain on drugs. Like the anti-smoking campaign just got so huge. With a vape, I think we're behind the 8 ball. It's going nuts, and it's faster. Social media is faster. Kids doing this is just exponentially growing year to year. I think that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing here, is just starting this conversation and trying to get to parents to understand, like, there's no way that this is good or that this doesn't transition to far worse.
And it really gets into the marketing is what he's really getting, you're touching on there. And that's where they are marketing with these colors, with these flavors, that it is harmless. And there's no regulation on the marketing of it, the ads that are out there for it. These, you know, back in the, you know, 50s and 60s, you'd have ads all over. How cool is it to smoke? Or, you know, now it's, how cool is it that I see this person, this role model, this celebrity vaping, and they're telling you, hey, it's safe. It's a safe alternative to cigarettes, tobacco products. There is no long-term effects to this, but there is. There's toxic metals associated with these, the nicotine, THC, and, you know, as I've preached on, we have no way, absolutely none, to know what the short-term and long-term real effects of these drugs are. And the cancer-causing carcinogens, arsenic, lead, chromium, nickel, all of these substances, heavy metals, are found in these vape devices, and you're bringing that into your body. You're putting that into your lungs. They're all cancer-causing, known cancer-causing carcinogens. What's the long-term effects of this? And that's really what we have to preach to people, that they are dangerous, they are not safe. This is not a safe alternative to using any substance, nicotine, THC, or anything else.
Right, and they've said, you know, if vaping is better than traditional cigarettes, but really when you look at all that marketing and the flavors that they are offering, if somebody smokes a traditional cigarette, why would they need all those flavors? They don't. And really, when we look at our statistics, according to the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, 89% of our teens would not use vapes if they weren't flavored. So then why do we have flavored vapes? So we know that plays a very important role in our youth.
I read last night that there's 7,000 flavors, and the bulk majority of them mimic candy, soda, and fruit flavors, which generally aren't as attractive to adults. And the new wave is alcohol, so that it tastes like alcohol, just to make sure that they get that nice transition to early alcohol use, which is, I'm being obviously sarcastic, but it's ridiculous that to think that you're not advertising to the youth when you have like Fruity Pebbles, strawberry lemonade, like when you go into your Halloween bag and all the flavors are also in your vape flavors, who are you looking for? I mean, it's criminal. It's terrible.
And that is what the marketers are doing. I mean, it's 100% targeting at kids, and the flavors are endless. I mean, you put strawberry, you know, blueberry, passion punch, citrus berry. I mean, you name it, it is endless. And they're gonna say, you know, it is safe. There's no tar here. It's odorless. It's discreet. There's no ashes. There's no smells. You know, you don't have that cigarette smell, you know, on your breath.
Which is they're basically saying you won't get caught by your parents as easily. That's really it, right? Like it's not on your clothes. When kids would smoke, when I was younger, you knew it. They would come in from lunch or driving around in their car, and you'd be like, oh, that's those 4 kids. They take a drive at lunch. Like you knew it. It was super obvious. Now it's in the bathrooms, it's in the locker rooms, it's in the lunchrooms. It's happening all the time, and you can't catch it, and it's not obvious, and it's almost a game. Like I have students who think it's part of a trend to do a social media post, like a Snapchat or something, vaping with a teacher in the background. So that's like the goal. That's when you're like cool. That's when you are like, yes, I'm validated. I've done it. So that's when that's cool now, evidently, to do that at school. And it's so hard. I mean, you take a teacher who's taking care of 20, 30 kids and trying to do the curriculum, trying to do all the things that are normally hard, and then you're trying to police this, which you can't always smell, which over half of the students have tried, I think, or even more. I think that's coming. It's insanely hard to combat. You have to have buy-in at home. You have to have buy-in at school. It has to be a universal approach.
And it's the discreetness about it. Is what you have no idea what they are using. Parents might think, well, it's just a flavored juice. It's not even nicotine. That might be what the kids are telling them. And that maybe is how it started, as I mentioned earlier. But, you know, even for law enforcement or other people to detect this, how do you approach somebody to deal with it? Okay, you're underage, you're vaping. Well, do they legally have it? Do they not? Is it THC? Is it nicotine? And without certain field tests and being able to take these and test these substances in a lab, sometimes you have no idea what it is. So how do you combat that? How do you deal with that out on a street level or even in the schools? I mean, obviously in the schools it's a little easier because you have a zero tolerance for it. You can't have these devices in school. You can't use this device in school. We're just going to take it from you and then deal with the repercussions from the school. And then, you know, an investigation can ensue from there. But on the street, years ago, yeah, if somebody's smoking a cigarette, you smell the cigarette smoke, you know they're smoking a cigarette. somebody smoking marijuana. Obviously, many of you probably know what marijuana smells like. You know, you saw somebody else smoke it, or you've smelled it at some concert, and you're like, oh, somebody's smoking marijuana. Now it's this high-grade THC oil concentrate that's coming through these vapes, which is far more dangerous than that. And they might be smoking right next to you, and you're thinking, oh, there's vaping, no big deal. You know, and you have no idea that they're getting high right there in front of you. It's that discreet. You have absolutely no idea what they're using or, you know, the compound that they're ingesting.
And same with the students. So when we'll have our conversations with the students, they have no idea what they're vaping. Well, my friend gave me it, but you don't know what's in that vape. It's not FDA approved. You don't know if they manufactured their own oils to put in there, so you don't know if it's THC, if it's nicotine, or if it's something else. Sometimes that's a little bit of an eye-opener when I've had those conversations. Just because somebody gives you something doesn't mean that it's okay.
So every other year, Wisconsin students take an anonymous survey called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, or the YRBS. The hope is really that since it's anonymous, students will answer honestly. We just recently received that 2023 data. So when we're looking at the Medford area senior high, and according to those results, 40% of all of our students have ever tried vaping. That's 44% females and 37% of our male students. That really ranges 28% of our 9th graders, 41% of the 10th graders, 51% 11th graders, and 41% of seniors. Students who currently do vape or have used those vaping products in the past 30 days are, 20% of the students, 20% are the female students, 20% are among the male students. And it really ranges 9% to 9th graders, 21% to 10th graders, 27% of 11th graders, and 22% of our seniors. Now, when we're looking at the 2023 Gilman High School statistics, we see that 23% of all Gilman High School students have ever tried vaping. We don't really have any detailed breakdowns by male or female and grade level because the numbers are just so low, which really is a good thing. When asked if any students are currently vaping or have used vaping products in the past 30 days, the Gilman survey really shows such low numbers that they didn't even register on the graph. So again, that's a really good thing. Now, when we look at the Rib Lake data, so 2023 YRBS high school data, you'll see that 26% of all Rib Lake high school students have ever tried vaping. And it ranges from 17% of 9th graders and 50% of the 10th graders. The percentage of 11th and 12th graders, again, is so low that they don't even register on the graph. Students who currently vape or have used vaping products within the last 30 days of the survey are 17% of all students. This ranges from 44% of all 10th graders. And again, the graph is so low on our 9th, 11th, and 12th graders that we're not picking up anything. And if students answered honestly, the data shows that the majority of students do not vape. So really, our key message here is it's most popular to not vape. The numbers might seem high to parents, when you're looking at these numbers, but really, if they have answered honestly, the data does show the majority of students do not vape. So that really is a big takeaway as a parent, is it's more popular to not vape. So in having those conversations with your students, letting them know that the majority of kids do not vape.
And then according to the CDC, and Nurse Amanda and I both see this in our health offices as well, the most common reason U.S. middle school and high school students give for trying an e-cigarette is a friend used them. So because my friend's using them, I'm using them. And the most common reason youth give for continuing to use e-cigarette is I'm feeling anxious, stressed, or depressed. And I'm sure you see that in your office all the time.
It's almost 100% connected to if you're being treated medically for anxiety, depression, or panic disorder in middle school or high school. We have to ask, and then when they say no, we say, really? And almost all of them are like, well, yeah, I do vape. And then you have to challenge them, so what do you vape? And they don't really know. But if they're having those symptoms, 85% of people who are having those symptoms, anxiety, depression, panic, heart rate increase, blood pressure increase, if you're having that as a symptom, you vaped THC or CBD within 90 days. So it's guaranteed. And when they tell me they don't, I'm like, you're lying. And like, eventually they're like, well, I don't know, I had, blue raspberry from Tommy or whoever, or I tried, we try a different one every day. Somebody brings a new flavor from their friend in Eau Claire or Colby or whatever, and they get 5 new flavors. Everyone's got to try it. They don't know if it's Delta or not. They're like, oh, we just tried the new Fruity Pebbles. How little they think about it. It's just a flavor. It's just something that they do each day to try something new each week. Whenever somebody gets one, it's so bothersome. It's so bothersome, and it's so connected to this whole, I don't know if they're just not developing coping mechanisms, or if they think this is a coping mechanism for anxiety or stress, or they're going through constant withdrawal when it's nicotine related. But it's, instead of dealing with any of these emotional issues in their brain as far as like a dopamine effect, they're just vaping more. And it's like, oh, the reason I'm continuing it is because I feel anxious, stressed, or depressed. The reason you feel anxious, stressed, and depressed is because you chemically aren't dealing with your emotions correctly, because you're taking in nicotine, CBD, or THC. It's so counterintuitive. It's so bad, that comment on my end of things. And this is in Medford. This isn't like in Milwaukee or Eau Claire. Like, there's a lot of kids, and it's going up, being treated for behavioral things that are not ADHD, that are actually just anxiety, depression, panic. They're triggered. Ask the question. If you're going to get your kid treated, ask the question and push it, because they're going to lie first to not get in trouble. That's a kid. If you can get around it, get around it. If you can't prove it, why say it? Like, push it, because if you're going to get treated, it's far more likely than not that they have vaped or continuously vape on a weekly basis. Boy, I'm really getting to my slides early.
No, and you've done this presentation before, and I've really taken that message from you with the kids in my office, because the first time I asked them to, no, I'm not. No, I really can't treat you if you don't tell me the whole story. And all of a sudden, then they feel comfortable and they do disclose. So I do think you have to be persistent, especially if you feel as a parent that something is not quite right. And when we get to some of those symptoms or behaviors that you may see as a parent, that's where maybe you do want to question a little bit more. So we said earlier, 27% of our MASH students have tried a vape. So back in 2018, when they took that survey, 39% of our students had ever. So when we're looking at that, that's over a 10% decrease of our high school students. However, I would say our middle school is drastically up.
Yeah.
They're starting much younger. But we are also less than the Wisconsin state statistics as a district, at least at MASH. And then 96% of teens who have ever used e-cigarettes tried them before 13. And right now, our MASH Raters committed students have really taken a lead on educating our younger grades within the classroom presentations. So last year, they started in 4th grade, just more or less showing them what a vape is, what to do if somebody you knew was vaping, and who those trusted adults are in the school as they were transitioning into middle school. Amanda continues to see it at her school, as do all school districts in our state and nationally. But our students are now going to go into the classroom in 5th and 6th grade and do another presentation with them, and with the goal of finishing in 7th and 8th grade. Amanda and I do a presentation in the 10th grade health class. But really, when we're looking at kids starting before the age of 13, that to me really is a priority for us to be in there educating them.
I mean, kids are seeing it everywhere. At the playground, skate park, on the school bus, anywhere. So even if you're not doing it at home, or no family or any friends that you're aware of, the kids still see it.
I have family members in the high school, and then for every well child exam in the high school or sports physical, every single one I ask, how often do you see people vaping and where? 100% of them say weekly, almost 100% say daily. They always say the bathrooms, before school, after school, or during lunch breaks. But I mean, it's everybody. There's a 0 chance that they're not going to be exposed to it at one point as a middle schooler, high schooler. So it's coming. So if you're not talking about it at home, or you're not even addressing it as a parent, it's almost negligence because it's coming. It's there. It's happening on a daily basis. Even the kids who don't like, or they're just like, oh, again? They go into the bathroom, same 3 kids, same 2 kids. They're vaping and they're like, I just got to go and I got to get out of here because if they get caught and I'm in here, then it looks bad. But there will be constant exposure, and it's not for lack of effort. I mean, we've tried to put detectors, we've done more random checks. When I say we, I said it's them, it's not me. But like, we had conversations about how to do this because it's so challenging, and the effort's been put in, and it's going to continue to be put in, but it has to be talked about at home because the exposure is going to be there in high school. I don't care how sheltered you are at home. When you get there, you're going to see it. You're going to smell the sweeter ones that want to be smelled. You're going to taste it. Your friends are going to talk about it. So start the talk early. Start it, and surprisingly enough, 4th and 5th graders don't always listen to adults who are trying to tell them to not do things wrong. So it needs to be repetitive. It needs to be at all levels, all the role models, all the parents. It needs to be a constant conversation if you even have a chance, I feel.
Yeah, they beat it to death, but it's anywhere and everywhere, the exposure. It's going to be at the schools, it's going to be on the playgrounds, it's going to be at the parks, it's going to be at the pool. You know, people are just openly using it, and it's socially accepted. It's getting to the point even where he said it's harder sometimes to get kids to admit it, but, you know, when I talk to people, you know, a lot of times it's on harder drugs, meth and heroin. I mean, even with the dabbing and the THC use and marijuana use, people openly admit to that, like they smoke cigarettes now. They're like, yeah, I smoke weed, who cares? It's going to be legal here next year. You know, it should be legal here now.
It's legal somewhere.
It's just so socially accepted, and that's what we're combating. We're combating the marketing, which is relentless on them, social media, where it's just pounded into their minds, and then they have all their friends using, they have their family using, they see it, they don't smell it, they don't see the dangers of it, and they're not told about the dangers of it, and they have absolutely no idea what the long-term effects are. If you think your kids aren't going to get exposed to it and just think, I'm going to have a talk with them, say no, it's got to be more than that. You got to preach to them. These are the long-term effects. These are the adverse effects. Yes, I know you're trying to combat some depression issues, anxiety issues, and everybody says, oh, you know, the marijuana is the miracle drug for that. That'll take care of it. Well, that's masking, you know, one thing, and it just leads into other issues, and it's just a vicious circle on an endless circle that they're never going to escape. And then oftentimes, as I said, it'll start with the vapes of the juices, just flavored juices, to nicotine, to THC, and then it opens up the door to everything else. When that doesn't work anymore, they get exposed to other drugs, they're more susceptible to use even harder drugs to try to self-medicate and try to deal with their personal issues. And
It's absolutely a gateway. I mean, doing one thing wrong doesn't lead to doing one thing right. It just opens the gate to something else wrong being a little less wrong. It's like, well, I'm already vaping. Might as well try what you got. Oh, we already get away with it. Why don't we try it a little more? It's a tough one. In regards to healthcare concerns, which I think is the next slide here, cardiac, pulmonary, neuro, mental health, of course, those are big, broad spectrum things, but I just kind of want to touch that with a little factoids. So in 2019, there were 2,000 cases of severe lung disease which required hospitalization, and it was all due to e-cigarette or vaping. In 2020, there was over 2,800 hospitalizations due to vaping and lung injuries and popcorn lung. So that's more than a 25% increase in hospitalizations due to vaping. From 2019 to 2020, it's not like the data is always like instant, so the anticipation is this is rising significantly. 68 people died due to e-cigarette complications in 2020. I don't know if that went up to 2021 from what I could read, but it's 68 people who didn't need to die, who were obviously way too young, right? So you don't hear about people dying from smoking cigarettes at 20, right? It's just not a thing. So what is more deadly as a kid, vaping or smoking cigarettes? I've never heard of anyone dying of smoking it. Not that you should smoke cigarettes, but when you think of like short and long-term effects, short-term health risk is actually higher with vaping than it is with smoking cigarettes. Long-term, it's equally horrible. 85% of the time where somebody's treated for a lung-related injury with vaping, they've admitted to THC use with vaping within 3 months. So if they're having a symptom, in particular with their heart rate, with their blood pressure, with anxiety, with flushing, with sweating, it's due to THC or CBD, which is, I mean, if you think about it, and that's what they're getting in the nurse's office, it's 100% certain. I mean, that's there. It's happening. Like we were talking about, the heavy metals, tin, lead, nickel, chromium, manganese, arsenic, cadmium, all of these things aren't meant to be in your lungs. All of them make it harder for you to breathe. All of those are substrates which cause cancer. They're carcinogenic. So does vaping cause cancer? If you include nicotine, THC, or CBD, 100% yes. They all break down into carcinogens or things that cause cancer, and 20 different types of cancer. So you increase your risk of 20 different types of cancer by vaping. Is it as bad as smoking? We're not sure. Smoking's been here for 50, 60, 70, 80, forever. Been here for a lot of years. Vaping has not. So we don't know 20 and 30 year studies on vaping in regards to like COPD, lung cancer, because it takes time for that to accumulate. The instant lung injuries, oh yeah, I mean, very not good to breathe in heavy metals into your lungs. Both cause cancer. It's predicted that vaping doesn't cause as many long-term cancers as smoking, but it's also kind of funny. There was a study of 1,700 students between 16 and 25, and if you smoke an e-cigarette or you vape, you're 4 times more likely to smoke a regular cigarette. Again, gateway. So even if it's more healthy, it's not. Even if you think it's more healthy than smoking, you're 4 times more likely to smoke a regular cigarette if you vape. So there's not a lot of good things going on here with vaping with kids. It's for sure a gateway.
So you would get the short term of the vaping, like those issues, those health issues, right? And then segue into cigarettes, and then you're going to end up getting like the COPD, emphysema. So you get both.
Yeah, you get the worst of both worlds, especially with THC and any refillable cartridge. So like these oils and stuff, they're so creative, right? They make their own. And what are kids? They're poor, they don't have money, or they don't work. So they try to refill this. They try to make their own. And if you go to YouTube and you look up videos, the normal substrate or medium that they add to is vitamin E acetate, which coats your lungs, much like tar with smoking. So like when you take out lungs of a smoker and they're black and they're coated with this black stuff, when people are refilling or adding THC and they don't even know the amount, they just want to get weed into their flavor for their kids, and they've watched a YouTube video, so they're pretty pumped about it. So the vitamin E coats their lungs. They have no idea how much THC they're getting, so they overdose on THC or nicotine. So nicotine overdose, which really wasn't a thing 20, 30, 40 years ago, the old MARB commercials, they didn't have overdoses of nicotine. Now it's so concentrated, a whole pack of cigarettes is in like the tiniest amount of fluid. So a 12-year-old who you can barely trust to let the dog out is trying to modify this and get a super concentrated amount of nicotine and or THC into these to give to their friends. So the nicotine toxicity and overdose is going up exponentially the last 3 years. So that's not a good thing to think of in the healthcare world, where you think of a 12-year-old coming in with nicotine toxicity and even death. That's another of those 68 deaths. Some of those are nicotine toxicity, which to me is nuts. Things I never even knew about, things I didn't even know when we went through medical training, which would have been 10 years ago now, wasn't even there. We didn't talk about it then, but this is a fast evolving one. So when they rinse out your lungs, when you're on a ventilator due to a vaporized lung injury, they're going to find vitamin E acetate coating your lungs in a bronchiolar lavage, we call it. So when they rinse off the inside of your lungs, they get this just like tar. Vitamin E acetate is terrible. So much like people would roll their own cigarettes to save money, they love to refill their cartridges because it's cheaper, and vitamin E acetate you could buy over the counter. Some of the things vape companies use you can't get over the counter. So this is how the kids do it. They're a little DIY project themselves, which is horrible. On the next slide there about mental health in regards to nicotine. So nicotine is bad. I mean, I think we've all known that, right? nicotine worsens anxiety symptoms, intensifies feelings of depression. It's far more addictive in a developing brain. So you take an emotional wreck that's full of hormones and you add nicotine, and it doesn't make them develop more behaviorally, emotionally, at least correctly. It works through the limbic system on and coats your dopamine receptors in particular with THC. So when we see people who use nicotine in particular, and THC is a whole other ball of wax, but not a good ball of wax, it causes disruption in attention, so increased or later onset, an increase of later onset ADHD. So these middle schoolers who've never had an issue with their grades, and then all of a sudden, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I just can't pay attention. I'm all wound up, they can't, it's like, well, typically, unless it's a very mild form of ADHD, it's pretty prevalent. Like, you kind of know it's coming. This is otherwise well-functioning kids who start to have attention-related issues about 12 years old and up. Increase in mood disorders, anxiety, depression, panic, inability to handle transitions or new environments, and a decrease in impulse control. So with nicotine use and THC use in middle school, there's a drastic increase in impulse control or high-risk sexual behavior. So increases in teenage pregnancies and STDs in middle schoolers, which is horrible. And it's endemic to the middle school and to the high school. It's happening. And I can't find one positive other than it might taste like candy. I mean, it's so bad. So it makes, to me, I always say it makes what is normal teenage behavior, which is emotional, which is angsty, it's against the big system or whatever, and it makes it way worse. So take your hormonal teenager and make them twice as hormonal, if you will. It makes it very hard for them to deal with their emotions. Signs and symptoms, which would be kind of the next slide there, like what you might see as like a parent is you might notice a fruity smell. You might notice like kind of it's not an unpleasant odor. You might notice like a candy-related smell. But in your kid in middle school or high school, you might see increase in irritability, more behavior in general that is more independent or solitudinous, where they don't want to be around you. They want to be around a new group of friends or really connect with 2 or 3 people that aren't their age. So you'll see like these good, well-performing kids all of a sudden switch groups. They'll get out of sports. They'll get out of activities. They'll connect with a different group that is just totally not like their siblings, not like their normal family dynamic. So if you notice that, that's a good reason to start asking questions. You might notice a more constant cough, wheezing, or bronchitis. So if you think about a kid who has asthma or any type of respiratory disorder or illness, it's going to get worse. And you're going to notice more hospital visits through middle school and high school for cough or bronchitis, which you shouldn't have as somebody gets older and as their airways get bigger. So you're going to see more of that in middle school and high school in those who vape. So those are things to look for as like a parent. You'll also see a drop in grades, obviously, calls home, lack of interest in things that are otherwise good, like their grades or how they look. If we keep going, and decreased respiratory performance. I had a couple basketball players who dropped off the team because they couldn't finish practices halfway through the year. I'm like, that's when you're supposed to be able to finish practice, when you're in shape as you get going. And they're just like, man, I just can't catch my breath, almost like I just got asthma. I'm like, you didn't just get asthma now. So let's talk this through. And then you try to get their parent out of the room, and they're like, well, I just don't really care for it anymore. These aren't my friends. We used to always travel together and do this sport together. Now I have a different group of friends, and it's just harder for me to breathe. I just don't care about it. It doesn't make me happy like it used to, is usually how it is. I love to win the game. I love to be in. I love to score the most. Total transition. Don't care about it. Just want to be with this new friend group, which is a little more normal for late high school, like behaviorally, but that is such a transition to middle schoolers that I haven't seen before in 10 years. Medically, like when somebody comes in and they have palpitations, it used to be energy drinks, now it's more vaping. They'll have abnormal heartbeats or extra heartbeats, or PVCs or PACs we call them. Increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. When they come in with anxiety or panic disorder, or they're unable to tolerate emotional stress, it's like the third question you ask is about vaping or any type of drug use, because it's super obvious. And they think like, no, if I say no, they're not going to know. I mean, it's a really, really, really close correlation. It doesn't mean if you have anxiety or panic disorder that you have to use a drug or you have to vape. I just see it to be much more likely. So it's a strong question we ask. Be more sweaty, more irritable as it looks. Last year, we saw more syncope or passing out or near passing out or need to lay down where they go completely white and their blood pressure will drop. So that's a big one. That is associated with heart rate as well. Anorexia, or people would vape THC or nicotine extremely high levels so that they didn't want to eat. So this became a trend in young females that was horrible and caused even more behavioral issues where they were coming in to be seen for anxiety. We saw rapid weight loss that wasn't developmentally correct, and then it would go in a different direction where we would end on, oh, you're vaping daily for the last 6 months, you've never vaped before. This is what all the girls are doing to achieve this. It's so difficult. It's so hard to hear it and to be like, this is so obviously horrible. I don't understand how you don't see it. And you try to give them, obviously, a lot of support, first of all, because it's like, I get it. You didn't mean it. You didn't intend for this to happen. But it's pretty obvious, and people are not seeing the connection right away. Other things we would do in the office, you get an EKG, chest x-ray. If we see damage, which looks like COPD in a teenager, which is crazy, which we don't see. We haven't seen as much until very bad COVID and vape-related lung injuries. So then we get a CT scan. If they're going downhill, they end up in a hospital. Again, these are thousands of people each year. There was more than 40 in Wisconsin. So if you think it doesn't happen here, you're silly, or you're just not looking. I think there was like 22 people in Milwaukee in 1 month 2 years ago, where it was one street person who was modifying the oil being put in, and then all the kids were in the hospital who got it from them. So it was traced back to one not desirable person. If you're trying to think of like what a vapor-related lung injury is that puts you in the hospital, think of like a really bad reaction to COVID. It's not one lobe of the lung, it's not just the bottom of the lung, it's the whole lung becoming inflamed and not working. So it's almost like an allergic reaction where your whole lung swells up and it can't do its job. They're put on a ventilator or assisted breathing. You try to rinse out all the garbage that's in there or the things that are coating the lungs, but it's as when you're on a ventilator with COVID, you're already at a very low outcome, and your recoverability is never going to be complete. So you're going to have permanent lung injury at that point. It needs to be taken serious because we see it. And if you think like little old Medford has no exposure, it's not happening, you're being naive, like very, very naive. And it can never be my kid is the silliest thing ever. I haven't had one kid in high school who said they haven't encountered it. So it's there. It's going to happen. I would say like parents need to up their game. They need to be educated and they need to address it. They can't just wait for the student nurses, the district officers to come in and do it. They need to take a role early and often. And if they start to see those signs and symptoms, they have to be persistent and pay attention and see these changes coming, because in all likelihood, they're going to try it. I mean, at least 30% or more will try it or will admit that they tried it. So you have to get on the front end of this before it starts to spiral, as far as I'm concerned, in regards to their health.
Yeah, and there's so many good videos out there too. Nurse Mindy and I, when we do our presentation, we include two for the 10th graders, and it is in regards to the hospitalizations in like 20-year-olds. There's two separate stories, and they're young girls, two different areas of the country, and same thing. Were put on ventilators, nearly died.
It's never going to happen to them.
Yep. So and we just found those, on the internet. So parents, you can look for those or reach out to Nurse Mindy or myself, and we can get those to you too. But there is a lot of great information that we learned a lot, but we clearly don't know everything either. So that's why we ask these guys too, because it's very eye-opening as a parent, as a nurse, anyone in the education field.
And just he talked a lot about the adverse effects of breathing it in the lungs and, all the other mental health related issues that can come with it, depression and anxiety. But these things can also explode. There is battery component within all of these devices that helps atomize and turn these juices and oils into the vape itself. And there are plenty of known circumstances and documentation, and plenty of things on the internet and videos you can see of these devices exploding. These kids will carry them around in their pockets. They'll explode in their pockets. They'll get severe burns, injuries, which can lead to other issues. But even worse, when they're actually using the device and inhaling the substances, the device will actually explode right in their face, and they'll get severe injuries to their face, burns to the face, burns to the mouth, things like that. So there's lots of stuff you can do and research online to show those types of issues as well.
And if you think it doesn't happen here, I have 2 patients that are in lawsuits against the company, and it's not going well because they have no guarantees, that have burns. So the lithium battery started to explode on one side and it spins, and it caused burns down through all of their flesh on their thigh while it was in their pocket. And they even have videos of it happening in the bar that they were in. This is a young adult in Taylor County. So I mean, like for us to think like, just wouldn't happen. I'll keep it at the right temperature or whatnot. It happens. It's happened to 2 of my patients in Taylor County who are trying to sue the companies who make them. And because there's very loose terminology and very loose legal, like, it's kind of an all at your own risk, they're like, it's going nowhere. Like, they're not even getting settlements out of it, which is kind of crazy. And I'm like, well, I'm really sorry. You shouldn't have been vaping.
Another reason not to vape.
All right, moving on, let's look at your cholesterol. But it's crazy. I never thought, I didn't learn about this when I was in medical school. This is all secondary information from patients that has kind of blown my mind a little bit over the last 5 years.
And this is, it's exploding, and it's getting worse and worse every day. It's a $1 billion a year industry. So if they can find a way to get more customers, to get more people using, and then not be held liable for anything that happens, they're going to do that. And they have plenty of money to throw at the advertisement and the marketing of these substances. So the only way to combat it is to educate people. And there's no stronger advocate about trying to stop something before it starts than I am. And it's all about education. It's about getting to people before they start, before they use, because once they're on it and once they're using, it just leads from one issue to another. And it's an endless circle that is hard to deal with. And as law enforcement by ourselves, on many drugs as I talk about, we're never going to arrest our way out of this situation. And the only way to combat it is through education and stopping it before it starts. So
I think I brought it up last year after some vape-related issues with kids in the clinic, and everyone kind of got together from the high school and other places, and we were trying to figure out if it was just as easy as just stop them, get a detector, do this. It's a very complex problem, and it's not like the school district is doing nothing or is not trying to pay attention to it. If you have a kid in high school, there's a 33% chance that he's using a vape or has, or she, and they likely have done it in your house. So you're as guilty as the high school staff to try to stop it. It's tough. It's hard to find, and it's frustrating because you'd like to be able to see it, take it, and be like, oh, catch everybody. And I think they're trying, and I think policies have changed. I think policies have changed each year to make it harder. It's not a simple problem. It's not the school district not trying. They're trying harder and harder and harder. It's a very, very challenging problem. If you have an idea or if you think you could figure it out and you come to the school board and you bring these ideas, it's not like they won't be looked at. I think we're trying pretty hard. It's just a very difficult problem. And I'm speaking for them because I don't work at the school district, but I was like, dang it, let's fix this. And then I'm like, holy crap, this is so hard. This is so much harder than I thought to find, to confiscate, you can't do random drug checks. There's a lot of different rules in things. So I think it has to get bigger than just the school. That's where I think the community outreach is going to be paramount, starting late elementary, early middle school in particular.
It has to start at home. You know, we have very limited resources in the school, the sheriff's office, and how to combat these issues. I mean, we've been combating drug issues for many years, hard drugs, and that keeps happening. But when you have these companies that can market this and sell this to your kids, and they have endless revenue, endless money, endless resources to push this on your kids, and they find new ways to push this on their kids, and they pay people that people idolize, sports figures and other people. I'm using it. It is safe. I mean, how do you combat that? Yeah, we can come up here and lecture all day long. Drugs are bad. Nicotine's bad. Cigarettes are bad. Vaping's bad. But they're also then getting exposed to those other things online through their social media accounts. And it's just endless. So if it has to start at home, it really falls on parents and educating people and getting them before they start, that, you know, regardless of what you're seeing out there, regardless of what they're telling you, these items aren't safe in no way, shape, or form, and only bad things are going to happen to you. So if you're struggling with one thing and I'm going to cope with it on this, it's going to create a different issue. And then you got to deal with that issue somehow. So things just get worse and worse over time. So yeah, we could preach all day. I could preach to everybody, but it's just so socially acceptable. And to combat that idea in people's minds, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. I haven't had an issue. I know tons of people that haven't had issues. And it takes years sometimes. I mean, people smoke all their life, and then they find an early grave, you know, because of the cancer that they got after 20, 30 years, 40 years of smoking. And they could have had a lot more of a fruitful life if that hadn't happened and extended that. So we don't know what those end results are, but we do know that those compounds are in these substances, these heavy metals, these different cancer-causing carcinogens. So it is going to happen. It will. And only time will tell where you get more and more stats to show that. But we've seen these same substances in other devices and plenty of research on that, and this is what happened over this amount of time. So to think that this won't cause that issue would be completely naive and absolutely stupid to believe that.
You're here.